My name is Susan Gibson. I'm very honored to be here today, and particularly to be in such tall company. When I prepared my remarks, as I was instructed to do, I got here tonight with them and found out that Tori McClure generally speaks extemporaneously, which I find very intimidating. And part of me wants to just sit down and see what she does with 20 minutes instead of 10. I thought it might be. When I received a call from Mr. Goyette to be a speaker at this event formerly known as Love of the Law, I was certainly happy to do that. And after all, I do love the law. It's been my career for 25 years. It's been the source of great joy. It's been the source of the best friendships I will ever have. So surely it would be easy for me to speak about that for 10 minutes. And after I said yes, I found out that the focus had changed. And I received a note from Scott Firkin, Epiphanies, powerful and transformative stories of people you know. And I quickly figured out that the you in that statement is you, and the people you know would be me. And I would be telling you a powerful and transformative story about me. Yikes. I do not particularly like talking about myself in public. Even in private, it generally takes some substantial amount of caffeine or a lesser amount of alcohol to do so. And then there's the subject matter, epiphanies, transformation, powerful subjects. What important, significant event in my life has caused a transformation? I grew up in St. Matthews, Louisville, Kentucky, the only child of a working father and a stay-at-home mother. If we were ever financially uncomfortable, I never knew it, and I don't think we were. My father was a designer for General Electric, but his greatest love was designing model aircraft. He hated to fly. My mother worked against every labor rule of the day up until the day before I was born, and then she was never in the workforce again. She was the ultimate school, scout, and civic volunteer. She encouraged me to play an instrument that I was bad at, to skate with one roller skate so I wouldn't get hurt, and not to date until I was 40. And I did 2 out of those 3 things. They helped me with my homework. They created scenery for school plays. They took me on vacations, even though they both hated to travel. From my father, I inherited a love of drawing and design. From my mother, a love of cooking. And they were 2 people who abhorred striking events designed to create epiphanies. My life progressed. Good schools, good grades, good boyfriends as defined by my parents. I entered into what we now call a starter marriage, and even that ended well, with both of us going on to have lives far better than we would have had together. I passed the bar. I got a job that I loved. I lost grandparents, aunts, uncles at advanced ages in the order that we're supposed to do that. And then I married again to a man who taught me to do all sorts of things a girl who skated with one skate never thought she could do. And then came April 2007. On April 30th, 2007, my husband of almost 18 years, Rick, pulled out a .32 caliber pistol from a holster on his ankle and shot himself through the head. It was Monday evening of Derby week, about 9:15 at night. He had been to the Louisville waterfront to cocktails on the river, the tail part of that referring to dogs because it was a fundraiser for the Humane Society. His beloved golden retriever was with him. He shot himself as he was driving at 35 miles an hour down a busy 2-lane street. The car continued to travel only a short distance. He stepped on the brake as he fired the shot. It remained in gear, but it never crossed the center line. The gun stayed in his right hand until removed by police. The first officer on the scene was, by coincidence, Rick's cousin, who was on routine patrol that night. He saw Rick before he knew anything of what had happened. I know all of this because I was in the passenger seat when it happened. If you felt even a little jolt at what I just said, you can imagine the shock that everyone who knew Rick felt. I need to tell you a little bit about him. He was raised by a blue-collar family. His father's formal education ended at age 12. He graduated from Jeffersontown High School as a student body president. He excelled at track and field events, winning medals in statewide competition. He started college at Western Kentucky University, where he played football until he figured out that even at 6'2" and 225 pounds, he was too little to not get creamed on the field. He transferred to and graduated from the University of Kentucky and then from the University of Louisville School of Law. His family had no money for school, so he worked to put himself through both. He became a prosecutor with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office in Jefferson County. He went on to become the director of the Medicaid fraud unit of the Attorney General's office. He worked for a short time with the IRS, and at the time of his death was the chief criminal prosecutor for the Bullitt County Attorney's Office. He was one of the finest legal minds I've ever known. He was a champion debater. He may not always have been right, but by golly, he always sounded right. His jobs frequently involved deadlines, publicity, contentious lawyers, and the vigorous protection of the constitutional rights of the people he was employed to prosecute. He prided himself on being fearless in his ability to do his job, so much so that none other than T. Clay gave him a business card on which he wrote, "I certify that Rick Gibson is afraid of nothing, including me." I found that card about 3 weeks after Rick died. As it turns out, Rick was afraid of something. He was afraid of depression, and he was afraid to seek treatment. I could tell you much more about the disease and how it affected our lives, but it isn't so very different from how it affects hundreds of thousands of families across the country. And the fact that Rick didn't seek effective treatment wasn't unusual either. He was a lawyer. Lawyers have one of the highest rates of depression and suicide of any profession, and we are also very bad about talking about it to other people. Unfortunately, we also die of it, and when we do, someone is left behind. I knew almost immediately that my life now had an artificial divide. There was a before and there would be an after, but I had no idea what the after would look like. Like anyone who has suffered a devastating but essentially meaningless loss, and really what is more meaningless than someone erasing themselves, my first stab at the after was to try to make Rick's suicide meaningful, or at least to make it more than just a few column inches in the newspaper and then nothing else. For the first months after Rick's death, I immersed myself in what I now call suicide lit. I read everything I could get my hands on about how and why people kill themselves, and about people who resisted that urge even when that urge was overwhelming. Within a few months, I was on the board of both the Kentucky chapter of Mental Health America and NAMI, which are both wonderful organizations who benefited very little from me, but from whom I learned so much. I am not a bored person. I am an only child. I do not play well with others, and I do not function well in that setting. Of the many things that these organizations do, two primary goals are lobbying and fundraising, both of those things that as a judge I am either barred from doing or encouraged not to. But what I did do was speak about the stigma that kept Rick from seeking treatment for his depression. I participated in events for Bridgehaven and Wellspring, two absolutely wonderful local organizations that do valuable work for the mentally ill in our community. I spoke at NAMI events around the state, and I was absolutely great at preaching to the choir because it was so easy. But I wasn't mentally ill. I had not lived with, parented, or been the product of a profoundly mentally ill person. And experiencing the death of one person who suffered from depression did not an expert make me. My audiences were far more tolerant of me than I may have been of them in similar situations, because basically I felt, what the hell am I doing up here? And here's the one thing that I learned about an epiphany. You can't make one happen by chasing it. As much as I have struggled to find the meaning in that event, I can't. A good man died because an untreated disease and a loaded gun were at the same place at the same time, and the rest of us just have to carry on. If you look up the definition of epiphany, you'll find something like this: an intuitive grasp of reality through something as an event, usually simple and striking. So I guess it's really not so surprising that it hasn't come to me through an event that was anything but simple. That's not to say that I'm still not searching for a way to make something positive out of the devastation. But now my efforts aren't so closely tied to what happened in 2007. All of the reading I did after Rick died launched both an awareness of and an interest in how many people are touched by mental illness. 1 in 5 of us will be. That awareness led me to consider just how many people I see on a daily basis in the criminal justice system are there primarily because they have untreated, unmonitored, or undiagnosed mental illness. Out of that interest has come the launch of a mental health court for convicted felons that focuses on helping participants succeed in staying out of prison by taking their medication and participating in treatment. I have no illusions that this will be an unqualified success. In fact, our first participant took his own life in a particularly horrible way about 2 months ago. Others struggle week by week to do the simplest things, including just getting from point A to point B. When something bad happens that would have been prevented by that person being in jail or in prison, I may regret the whole thing. I may not have been in a position to do this without Rick, but I'm no longer struggling to do something for Rick. I can't change what happened or make it any better, and I can only go forward one step at a time and hope something good will happen out of those small steps. And for now, I'm content to let the epiphany come in its own good time.